Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Okay, folks, we're going to do another Q&A with Nicole Shoup this morning. Nicole, if you'll recall, is a fellow board member of the Best Horse Practices Summit with me, and she is also kind of a professor of horsemanship. So she teaches some classes for the Ohio State University at the Agricultural Technical Institute. And I know she just told me she's going to be doing even more of that in the future. So Nicole, why don't you tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm based in Millersburg, Ohio, which is like north central Ohio, right in between like Cleveland and Columbus. And I teach some classes over at the Ohio State ATI Agricultural Technical Institute. It is a mouthful, but you got to say the whole thing because we are the agricultural branch specifically of the Ohio State. So students come there to get a 2-year agricultural technical degree. I specifically teach within the equine program. So I'm teaching courses like marketing, basic horsemanship, judging, facilities management, where we run a big event. And in the marketing, we raise and sell standard bred yearlings. And then the other classes that are run are health, nutrition, a couple other things I'm not thinking of, horse science, things like that. So you get a really well-rounded education as far as being prepared to go into the industry and hopefully have a successful career. So I love that job, love that age group, and that is something that I'm largely doing right now. I'm also a trainer. I started my business almost 3 years ago. So I do some training, but I like to keep my business diverse. So I'm teaching at the school, I'm doing training, do some lessons, and I also do videography, photos, and sales as well. So I never have a boring day, but I hope that brings us enough background that we can get through this Q&A and have a lot of good questions. So, because the students, they make me think about things that I wasn't thinking about before. So, but yeah.
Teaching is another layer of learning. It really is. It will force you to. I saw you had done a post on what does sacking out mean to you not too long ago. And that's kind of an old term. You don't really hear it that much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But so I did want to ask you before we get started, what was the nexus of that? What student tweaked your brain a little bit on sacking out?
That's a great question because I did comment there that a student had asked. So what we were doing in our basic horsemanship classes, we were taking our standard bred brood mares. So they are pregnant. They are not broke to ride, but they did race on the track. And none of them have been tacked with saddles before. So I wanted to go through the whole process of getting them tacked in full Western tack, breast collar, back cinch, all that deal. And so when I was laying out the order, within that order, I had sacking out, quote unquote. And I thought they had an understanding of what I wanted that to mean. And right at the end of the semester, one of them was like, well, and this is kind of confusing, but we didn't do as much sacking out as I would have liked to do. Due to the class, things get washed away, but we were okay. But anyways, she goes, well, I thought that meant getting on them, getting all over them and stuff, like being on them. And I'm like, I have always interpreted it as exactly what it is. Sacking out, you have a sack of some sort, you have a tarp, you have a jug, whatever you have, and you're just exposing the horse to the feeling of that, carrying that, things like that. And so it made me have a little bit of a crisis for a second because I wondered, I'm like, maybe you learned it somewhere else and you have a better, different understanding or something like that. So I took to the Facebook land, and I think the answer that I got was what I was looking for, is that, or what I assumed is the answer is, it is what it is working with a sack with a horse. So,
Yep.
So, go ahead.
I remember my introduction to that term was when I bought my problem horse that would flip over backwards when I was a teenager. And I was looking for, how do I solve this? And there were multiple people that told me sack him out. And I'm kind of, what does that mean? So I finally asked one of them, like, literally, what do you mean? And he said, go to the hardware store downtown, buy a gunny sack, fill it with like some cotton or something soft, and you just want to pretend to beat the snot out of him with that, and then it doesn't actually hurt him, and then he'll gentle down, which is maybe not the best way to go about it. Like you don't tell a 16-year-old to beat something, because the intensity with which I came with that probably was more than what he intended, but it
Yeah.
didn't work either. That does not solve a horse flipping over backwards for anybody that might have that problem. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that could lead us to a really good point here is it really wasn't on my question list, but we could have a little discussion about how do you properly sack out a horse? What's the most important things you got to watch when you're doing that? Because it definitely, once I posted that, I kind of forgot that for some people, that's kind of like a dirty word. Like that's a triggering term, sacking out. And I wasn't thinking about that. So what do you think?
I would say it's probably been the term itself has been taken over more by what we would now call desensitizing. And I hate to get into semantics. I even think desensitizing it's not the full picture. It's a stage. So like I'm actually working on a video right now called Even Though, Even If, Even When. And a lot of people I find when they do the desensitizing, and this is more common than people realize, they actually train the horse to go into the freeze response, and the freeze response is right next to fight or flight. That you're not on the good side of the scale at that point. Just because he's standing still and seems to be tolerating it, that does not mean you have actually gotten into the right place or good place or a useful place. So that's kind of, I think desensitizing is a misnomer. Sensitizing is what we spend 99% of our time doing. And I think looking at it as I want the horse to tolerate things, but ultimately defer to me and remain under my control. And that's the important part of this, is that you exhibit control, even though, even when. That's the really thing. You if the horse can't walk forward and turn left and stop and turn right and do basic, your 4 or 5 primary commands while the thing is happening, then you have not reached the level of anything that approximates safety with the thing and the horse handling the thing. Standing still and tolerating the thing in no way indicates you're good to go, or that the horse
Well,
is good to go. So
I I always think about that too. When are you going to experience the thing when the horse is standing still? In real life, you're probably going to be in movement. So I think that's a great start because we did have some questions on here about, or in the group, in the bit spurs and good sense. I believe that's the term or the title. So some people were asking a little bit about shutdown horses. So when we're talking about the freeze response, I think freeze, shutdown can start to really hold hands together. So maybe we could go start with, what would you say in your experience is, how would you define a shutdown horse or partially shutdown horse? And how would you recognize that they are?
okay, so first of all, I'm going to say this is not a term I'm a huge fan of either.
Okay.
I think, like a lot of the other terms, it carries a pretty negative connotation, and somewhat undeservingly so. So what I mean by that is that probably 95% of every lesson horse in the world is kind of a shutdown horse. Um, and they kind of have to be. Like, that's really a state of self-protection because they're not being handled by people who are experts. They are having to just tolerate and handle, even though, even if, even when. And so this kid's bouncing and pulling too hard on the rein and this and that and the other, and I'm still supposed to go forward and not kill them. And so in order to do that, I have to deny what my true feelings might be, and I have to just hold it together. I think a lot of adults walking through the world, certainly men doing the job that they hate to support their family, but it's what they need to do, not what they want to do. And all they're living a life of a shutdown horse too, right? Same kind of concept. So sometimes that's a necessary thing and a self-protective thing, and it shouldn't be looked at as a dirty word. If the horse has an unpleasant hour once in a while and the other 23 hours a day are good and well cared for and all, I don't think that's classed as an abusive life or anything, right? It can be managed and tolerable. So that's kind of what I view a shutdown horse of. It's basically a horse who isn't really expressing their necessary opinion on everything or emotional state. But again, part of that's the goal. I have seen a whole bunch of cases where people take what they consider to be a shutdown horse and they go to trying to validate like every emotion this horse has, and they wind up with something they can't lead from point A to point B 3 months later. Did you do a good thing in that instance, or did you take a horse you could manage and now turn him into something you can't get to the vet if you need to in an emergency? So I don't know that sometimes opening that can of worms isn't the best thing to do. So
Yeah. So when I understand where you're going with that and what you're talking about that. So can you talk a little bit about, have you experienced, let's say you're in a scenario where, how about this? You have someone purchases an ex-lesson horse that has been living in this shut down, slightly shut down, whatever you want to call it, way to get through that job, basically. And they go to a new home. And anytime they go to a new home, things can change. But I feel like I've seen this before where that horse gets pulled out of that life, goes to a new life, and things get really messy, despite them being like a perfect lesson horse through all of that. Would you say, can you talk a little bit about that? And have you experienced something like that? And what do you think that all means? And what can people do about that?
sure. Well, so one thing I would say that those shutdown horses do depend on, like there is a certain amount of stability required for a horse to be shut down. There has to be a predictable thing that they're tolerating until. So there's almost like an agreement right there. You may disagree with whether it was a fair agreement or not, but like that horse understands there's an end to this and then I'm going to be okay. Otherwise cooperation wouldn't exist, right? So when we take a horse out of an environment where they, again, whether you feel like they should or not, but they have an element of security and expectation and they have kind of agreed to the deal, and now we move them to a different environment and we may remove some of the things that we considered bad for the horse but that the horse considered security. And now
Fair
that
point.
horse becomes insecure, life's not predictable anymore. This thing that I could count, it's not very much different from what we would call institutionalization of prisoners or people that are in the military, and then they get out and all the structure has been removed and now they don't know what to do. Because I always went to eat at 8:05 every morning and then someone told me what to do and I went here and I did, and now nobody's telling me what to do and I don't know how to, and the removal of structure is not always a gift.
Yeah.
It can be very, very um, unsettling, kind of taking the footing away and all of that stuff. And I kind of think there's an overarching like it is good within the world that people want to consider the horse a little more and do things that are better for the horse. But what is better for the horse? That's not nearly as simple and straightforward an answer as we might think it is. That's a complex mix of things. So you can do what you think is better for the horse and blow up their whole world, at the same time. So what I would do if I were to get a new horse, I would try to offer them structure. I think being consistent and fair. Um, since we've already breached the whole thing with terms, like I am a person that still uses the term respect in the horse world. I think, like a lot of other things, respect is a paradigm that we have that we're placing on the horse. It's our way of explaining and organizing something that exists within our social structure. So does a horse know that invading my space was disrespectful? No. But once I uphold a boundary and I communicate this to them, and now we have a standardized rule that I've been consistent and fair with, now there is a level of respect because there is now an understanding of a consistent rule. So those things of being consistent, upholding your boundaries, the horses love predictability. They don't like unpredictability. If you're consistent, they can see you coming, they know how this is going to be handled, and they agree to the deal, then that's what makes them happy and tolerable. The if you are sometimes trying to work with your horse and I want your head up in this position when I lead you, da 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 da, and then 5 minutes later you give them lots of slack and they're grazing on the ground, you did not just do that horse a favor. You just muddied the waters as to what the rules are. And that's where people run into a whole lot of problems. They think they're doing the nice thing for the horse, and in reality, they just took the structure that the horse was comfortable or familiar with and violated a whole bunch of rules, and now the horse does not know what's going on. And 5 minutes later, you expect the old rules to be back into play again, and the horse is like, "Well, I didn't get that memo. Like, what are we doing here? Because I was just doing this, and you said yeah, and that was good, and now I'm doing this." And like I don't know how to make the horse has a brain the size of your fist. How are they going to make sense of all of that, right? You have to be consistent with things. That's what they really like. So
Absolutely. So, piggybacking off of that a little bit, so let's talk a little bit about horses that don't like to be caught. So, because that was a piece of one of the questions that we had here, because we've kind of been talking about this shutdown and bringing horses home and things like that are shut down and they start to come out of it. Consistency is huge. So, but what are you, when you experience a horse that doesn't like to be caught and or is hard to catch, what does that mean to you and how would you approach working with that?
So first of all, what it means to me, I think most of those horses are made. I don't think they're necessarily born that way. Like I've halter broke hundreds of horses, and a lot of them weren't foals. A lot of them were, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 13-year-olds that were brought to me on halter broke, and so if I can get that horse in 3 or 4 days where I can walk out into a reasonable sized paddock and put a halter on him within 5 minutes and lead him out of there, then that tells me kind of the natural state of the horse is that this is pretty doable in a reasonably short amount of time. And honestly, some of the hardest horses I've ever worked with in terms of being caught were some of the cowboy broke horses that were actually like roped in a remuda. You go rope a horse 30 days in a row to put a halter on him and then don't go rope him. Good luck with that. That's going to be the one that's going to take you forever to get where you can just walk
Why?
up to him. What are the rules and the standards that you set up that I'm going to get 20 feet away from you and throw something at your head? You know? And again, I might be able to enact the freeze response and have you stand there and tolerate this, but were you comfortable with it? Hell no, right? Were you, it was just the best bad option that you had. But now if I'm going to try to get 15 feet away, well, I might let you throw something at me hard from 100 feet away, but 5 feet away is different, right? So when we start getting closer and closer and closer, now I can't agree to that deal anymore. This is going to hurt. This is dangerous. And so that's their expectation. So I am really, really big on, I don't really catch horses so much. They catch me. I pretty much always have the horse come to me. And sometimes that takes a lot of time. Sometimes that's an hour, but if you repetitiously set that up, and I'm willing to invest that time early on into this thing, then a couple weeks later it's nothing. I don't have to go catch horses. Most of the horses that I've got, like when I open the gate and I enter the paddock, and all mine are turned out. I don't have anything in stalls unless I have a very specific reason why it has to be in a stall. So all mine are in paddocks from like a quarter to 5 acres. And when I enter it, they're walking to me. That's how that goes. Um, so I think that's worth the investment in time. If you have a horse that is hard to catch, I would probably take riding or whatever thing is on my agenda off of the agenda until I have that part of things solved. I'm real big on setting stuff up. So, so like if my horse's expectation of his first interaction with me, well, I'll just continue to pick on the cowboys and the rope and the horse and the remuda. If his first interaction is, I'm going to go pretty far into the sympathetic nervous system into freeze. This guy's going to throw something at my head, and then he's going to walk up and catch me. Well, how is the day supposed to go? That's like kidnapping a girl to start the first date, right? Like you're probably not in that with a nice consensual kiss, right? This is not the way I want to start things off on this particular day in this journey. So, um, I think that's a pretty big deal in terms of setting things up and getting that comfortable and relaxed deal. So I'm a little, I don't want to be inconsistent here. I think it's okay to have some elements of the shutdown horse where they don't have to like everything, but they kind of do have to tolerate it. But there's like a degree of that, right? Like I don't want that pushed so far that what tolerance is a biological freeze response of a deer not moving so that the wolf won't eat it. Like
Yeah.
that's taking a concept that I could live with and pushing it to an extreme that is a whole lot less favorable for us and for the horse. So degree matters. It does.
I feel like something to think about too is whatever it is that you do, and this kind of even piggybacks off of sacking out. If you pay attention to the details and you're releasing or rewarding the little things that you would want the horse to be doing during those things, like looking at you, staying with you, things like that, you probably won't create such a problem. What do you think?
I completely agree. Yeah, I am like I'm really big. We talk about sacking out. I am going to do a thing to the horse. I don't care what the thing is. It could be a flag, a tarp, a rope, or whatever. I don't care. And then I'm going to lead that horse forward 5 feet. And that I'm going to do that. They don't stand in this spot while I do this thing and stop and start and stop and start and stop and start 30 times. We always move. And that's exhibiting the control and letting, and then I'm paying attention, just like you said. I think you said a great thing there. Does the horse look at you? Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of horses cannot look at their person. It's too intense. And if they can't look at you, they're not really comfortable with you. And that's a huge, huge, huge thing. And I see that like it's most horses. It's not some of them. It's most of them cannot look at the person. It's too intense. So that's a really big deal. Yeah, watching those things. Can horses breathe? Like if you're doing the sacking out, if you go to catch your horse and he's standing there like a giraffe with his head up in the air and he stood still, but he held his breath with his head up high, I'm not I'm not catching that horse. Like I might walk up and touch him. I'm walking away again. That was not a good interaction. You need to break whatever he anticipated there and keep setting that up until you get a much better, more favorable reaction from that horse. So
Fantastic. Okay. So let's switch it up a little bit. Somebody asked a very, very important question. Jam or jelly?
I am more of a jam guy, and I agree. I thought that was a fantastic question. I like some texture. Now, I might draw a line here. If I'm going to be doing something heavily jammy and we're talking like blackberry seeds, then I might appreciate the seeds because blackberry seeds are, they're a thing. So I might appreciate the seeds not in there. But if we're spreading that on toast and there's more texture in, then I would be good with it. But if like I've got the potential of a seed stuck in my teeth, then I could draw a line there. But if it's strawberry, blueberry, then jam, 100% jam every time. Yep.
Okay. It's a good question.
It is. How about you?
Oh, I was thinking about the answer and it just depends on the day. Hot pepper jam and cream cheese. Or maybe that's jelly. Oh no. I don't know. But
If it has like pieces of hot pepper in it. That's texture, right?
Benefiting.
So that
Yeah.
isn't jelly when you strain everything out and you kind of only keep the liquid component. The jam is where you it's more like a puree. So there is still some skin, some of the other stuff in there. Am I right or wrong on that? Because that's my assumption here.
I think you're probably right. I didn't Google it beforehand, even though I told myself I would, so I can have a clear definition of what we're talking about here. But I would agree with the texture. I would rather have some texture. I make my own black raspberry jam and black raspberry stuff, and I do not like to take the seeds out, and I just leave them. Now, is it pain in the butt the rest of the day? Oh yeah, you're picking them out of your teeth, but you got, I just got to have them. So,
So let me ask you this. Do you appreciate any savory type jam? So not necessarily sweet, but like a bacon pepper jam or something like that. That's
sometimes, like I just recently bought a caramelized onion chutney. I don't really know exactly what that is, but we've been putting it on our burgers or meat and stuff like that. And I like that. Now, smelling it out of the jar, absolutely not. Putting it with the food, yes. So, but that's really
okay.
all the further I've ventured. So,
Well, you're young. There's time. Yeah. I probably hadn't tried
oh,
a chutney till I was mid-30s, so you're way ahead of me. So yeah.
and of course, my husband is, I don't even know what a chutney is. And he's like, well, it's a chutney. Of course it's this. I'm like, how do you know this? But okay. So I just picked it off the shelf. But, anyways, okay. Let's go into, I think this actually would go well with the rest of the questions we've been talking about. But what would you say is the most misunderstood piece of equipment you use regularly? And you can maybe even have a couple pieces. What's something you got hanging in your barn that someone would want to crucify you for that you use?
Um, I'm a little torn here between bits and halters, to be frank. Shoot, spurs could go on that list too.
What about hobbles?
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, there's a lot. It's hard. The hard part for that is for me to single that down to just one. I have to say, hobbles, I have not had a lot of resistance on. I've had a lot of people that were kind of, ooh, I don't know, but they seem to be more open to the explanation, and then they're okay with it. Like I haven't had venomous internet battles with anyone over hobbles that I can recall.
Okay,
Um,
so check that one
the
off.
Yeah, the rope halter thing seems to be a new thing. It's now being pretty vilified. Um, and like the odd thing is 10 years ago, if you were in Europe, that was called the ethological halter. So that was the kind halter that you should be using. And if you weren't using it, you were doing unethical stuff. And now it's become the unethical thing. And the snaffle would be on there too, just because it is so misused. I do say this with the bit stuff, like it's not even close. More horses' mouths are actually damaged, like cut tongues, bars. The vast majority of the actual damage done to horses' mouths is through snaffles, no question. Not even kind of close. Um, and then we're going to also say that they're the kindest bit, like they do the least force and all. And I think that's the problem. It's the misunderstanding. I feel safe with this, so I don't have to be as careful with this. And now I actually do damage with this. I kind of like putting people with a bit they're scared of because they're going to be really careful. You know what I mean?
Or method, yeah.
Yeah, they are going to slow
Uh-huh.
down, pay attention, and be careful. But so it could be any of those. Probably historically, the one I fought the most battles on for sure is the snaffle bits and the kind of, and I ride snaffles all the time. That's my bread and butter. But with all of them, here would be the overarching thing. It's a tool. It's an inanimate object. It is amoral. Amoral doesn't mean it lacks morals. It means it's incapable of having morals. It's not good. It's not bad. It can't be good. It can't be bad. Only the animator can choose how that thing operates. One of the things I like to say sometimes is about bricks. You know, you can take a brick and you can build a home, a hospital, a church, a school. You can take a brick and you can bash in someone's brains. Neither outcome is the fault of the brick. So snaffles aren't bad. Snaffles aren't good. Halters aren't bad. Halters aren't good. Hobbles aren't bad. Hobbles aren't good. It's how you use the thing. You can have great outcomes. You can have poor outcomes. Neither outcome is the fault of the brick. So
Yeah. Like most horsemanship questions, when you really come down to it, it's kind of like it just depends, and it depends on the user.
yeah.
So, okay, so since we're on the topic of bits, surprise. Let's there was a discussion in the group where someone was talking about how they had just bought a Western pleasure horse and they want to transition that horse to dressage so they can do working equitation. So they want to take the horse from a ported Western bit, whatever would be a typical curb bit that they're probably using in Western pleasure, and transition that horse to a snaffle so they can begin their dressage training, preparing for working ec and things like that. So I think the overall question is just, what do you need to look for when you make that transition? How do you start making that transition? And anything you need to keep your eye open for.
So there would be some things about that that are pretty general and generic, and there would be some things about that that could be pretty specific just because of what most Western pleasure horses go through. So in that specific question, there is the element of changing from a shanked bit with a tall port to a snaffle. Generally speaking, but I think this would be true 99% of the time. Western pleasure horses spend most of their life in a snaffle, even when they're an advanced 8-year-old open level winning the Congress kind of a horse. Most of their time is still spent in the snaffle, and they're going to just transition them to the shank bit and show them in it. But Monday through Wednesday at home, they're still, so going to a snaffle there in and of itself should not be a challenge at all. Now, what that horse, kind of like we talked about with the shutdown horse or the horse moving from one barn to another, what that horse's expectation of what the rules for that snaffle are now going to be radically different. So instead of my pole being below my withers and down here, the dressage rider might want a fairly elevated pole, and so contact in the mouth is now going to have a different definition than it had prior. Think we had also talked about on that one, like specific to Western pleasure horses, a lot of them are trained with what's called a spur stop. And that means rather than I pick up my hand to slow you, I can squeeze with my legs and my spurs, and that should cause you to slow down and theoretically collect up and lift your back and all those things. But squeezing with two legs does not send a Western pleasure horse forward faster.
Just right? Every other horse it does usually.
Yeah. And so again, like that transition, you're going to take a horse that believes they already know the answer to a question, and you are now going to apply the same question but expect a different answer. So that process for any life form will be frustrating and difficult. And so I would try to look at that, especially as I'm looking for like 1% changes. I'm not looking for radical changes. I want any little thing that went in the direction of I'm trying to go. And so you're not like taking that horse's world and flipping it upside down, right? We're gonna make a gradual left-hand turn, and over the course of degrees in 180-degree days, 1 degree at a time, we're going to be going the other direction. But we're not going to try to go to the other direction this week. You know what I mean? We're going to make it a lot more gradual, very methodical, and probably expect to have some kind of meltdowns in the middle of that, because again, we took this structure, we took this thing you thought you understood and you were comfortable with, and a deal that you agreed to, and now it's different. So that's how I would look at it. So I think you have to be pretty empathetic for the horse in that situation, and just make sure you allow it the time to acclimate, and you don't put too big of a chunk on it at one time for it to digest, and so forth. And those things can be successful. I'm not saying that's a battle you should never take on or something like that. I definitely think that could be done. You need to have a realistic timeline for it, and you need to have an understanding. And that horse is going to revert. Like 3 months from now, it's going to move forward off of your leg a little bit, and then the next day you're going to put your leg on it, and then it's going to draw back down because it reverted back to the old rules. And you're going to have to understand that that is a normal part of the process. You don't take that personally. That's probably the hardest part of that whole deal is that you don't feel like I'm a failure, I'm trash, I'm doing wrong. No, you're not. That is totally predictable. It is going to happen. It is a
Yeah.
normal part of the process. Chill out. That's going to happen. So you just be consistent, and try not to make huge changes, and it can definitely be done.
Yeah. Do you have any specific recommendations for what kind of snaffle you should transition that horse to? Does it matter?
So I do. I would go back to a single jointed snaffle. My expectation, I would always evaluate this horse because I don't know who trained it. I'm going off of pretty a generic thing, but my expectation is that that horse will be kept very, very, very straight, and thus one of those areas where the rules will not be so strong is in lateral flexion. So that would be my area that, and I see this very commonly. Reining horses too. I've had a bunch of, so I don't want to just pick on one genre, but I've had some reining horses in to fix, and they were stiff as a board. And so if you have that horse that's only been worked with right here in this straight line, you can break him off to the sides, and that's like new territory where he doesn't
Mhm.
have such a strong anticipation, and I can relax him, and that's my inroad. So
Mhm.
if I'm expecting that and I'm thinking lateral things, I'm going to go with the lateral tool, which would be the single jointed snaffle.
Would you pick a specific cheek?
Um, I would. I mean, honestly, I am generally going with O-rings if I am in any kind of a situation where I have an expectation that the horse needs to release tension. And so if I'm starting a young colt, that's going to be a challenging emotional thing, and they're going to build tension and need to release it. If I'm working with a problem horse, again, challenging emotional thing, they're going to build tension, they need to release it. If I'm taking a horse that has an expectation and I'm now changing that thing, part of that process is going to be tension and frustration, and they need to release it. And so in all of those circumstances, the O-ring with the more freedom of movement of the mouthpiece will allow them to do that more readily and easily and with less fatigue. Mouth fatigue is a big thing that we don't tend to think of or accommodate for. And so if that horse wants to lick and chew and move their mouth, and all they have to pick up is the weight of the mouthpiece when they do that 800 times in the course of an hour, or they have to pick up the weight of all of the cheeks and part of the headstall and the mouthpiece, that's different. So the easier I can make that on them, the more I can encourage them to release that tension and relax, the better I'm setting things up. So
That segues into a perfect question because I was having a big debate with my students whether you should fit with no wrinkles, one wrinkle, two wrinkles, depending on each situation, depending on conformation, maybe of the horse's mouth. But what are your thoughts on the wrinkle rule?
I have very, very strong thoughts on this.
Okay,
so
perfect.
uh, so the answer is no wrinkle. There can be a caveat or two, but the answer is no wrinkle. So if we think about what a wrinkle means, the wrinkle means that the bit is in contact with the soft tissues. The corner of the mouth, no matter what bit you're riding, is the first anatomical part of the horse to receive any signal directly from the bit. Okay. And so if the bit is constantly putting pressure there because of our adjustment of the headstall, then that is the textbook definition of desensitization. Here is pressure from the bit, ignore it. That is what a wrinkle in the corner of the mouth means. That's not a statement I ever want to make to a horse. I want, here is pressure from the bit, respond in a specific way, right? Not ignore 5 pounds of pressure. 10 pounds of pressure is when you should turn left, right? And that's what the wrinkles mean. And again, that kind of is akin in that like shutdown territory and all that. You're saying tolerate this. You don't really have a choice about it. Tolerate it. Now, I am probably more inclined, if I'm starting a colt, I actually have it fairly loose. So I let it hang like a quarter of an inch or even 3/8 of an inch below the corner of the mouth. And that is because I want it down there annoying them. And they will pretty quickly actually learn to pick it up and hold it. And now they have it in contact with the lips. But they can also shift it around. So I'm thinking of that fatigue thing. It's not unlike if I gave you, let's say, a 5-gallon bucket full of water, and I said, you're going to carry this half of a mile, you probably wouldn't like me too much, but you'd say, okay, I can get that done. If I said, you're going to carry that a half of a mile only in your left hand and you can't set it down or change hand, now it's worse, right? So if that bit is a little loose, that horse can adjust. It can move it around. It can put it in a more comfortable position. I have given it some options to keep itself more comfortable. If I have it crammed down their throat with 2 wrinkles, that's not on the table. And it makes a big difference. It's one of the very first things, if I have a problem horse or I'm doing a consult or whatever, one of the first things I'm going to do is lower the bridle about 90% of the time. It's a big deal. That 2 wrinkle rule is, it's one of the worst old wives' tales or traditions handed down. Like it's bad. No question. It's not the best way to do it. No question. Experiment with it and the horse will tell you. Like, you don't have to take my opinion here. My opinion is based upon thousands of horses. Let the horse tell you, and they will tell you every single time. Now, the exception is the 19-year-old that's had those 2 wrinkles in its mouth for every one of those years. And you were in that shutdown territory again. Now you have been institutionalized. You're so used to this thing that if I go break the rules and violate it, it will now make you very uncomfortable. And so in some of those situations, the kindest thing I can do is not mess with it, because you got to have that structure and that security that you're used to. If I have a choice of how I'm setting up the structure that this horse will be used to for the rest of its life, zero question that no wrinkle is the best way to do that.
Just hanging out in the corner of the mouth.
Or even lower.
Or even lower. So the colts, you're going to have it a little bit lower. Then do you eventually raise it a hair so it's in the corners, or you just leave it there? Or what are your thoughts there? And also, tongues getting over bits.
Okay.
Thoughts around that.
So the bit being low, this will seem counterintuitive, but the real thing that promotes is the mouth seal. What the mouth seal is the horse picking the bit up and sucking on it to hold it. All right. And that is one of the most foundational. It's not talked about enough, but like that's the first skill that any horse should develop with regard to the bit. It's not turning left. It's not vertical flexion. It's not any of those things. It is pick the bit up, hold it, and suck on it. Until they can do that, you shouldn't pull on a rein. You shouldn't drive them. You shouldn't do anything else until they have the most foundational skill, which is the mouth seal. Pick it up and suck on. All of the research that you might hear about bits affecting breathing or tongue problems or any of that stuff that's in, all of that only happens if and when the mouth seal is interrupted. Okay. And we don't talk about that nearly enough. Just like the brick thing, the bit can have an unfavorable outcome, but only if certain things fail. Right. So establishment of the mouth seal, and the horse picks up the bit and sucks on it and holds it comfortably. That should be priority number 1 with every horse, with every bit. No caveats to that whatsoever. So if you get that done, tongue over the bit's not ever a problem. Okay, because
Okay.
that's part of that equation.
Mhm.
Rarely will I have a horse from the start that wants to put their tongue over the bit. And when I say rarely, like I don't actually remember the last, it's been more than a decade since I've had that kind of a problem. So
Okay. Okay.
rarely. Um, Most of the time, if I have that, like I'm actually we're shooting a video for this very soon for the bit course and all. I'm having to take a horse without a problem and just show how I would handle this on a horse because I don't have a horse I can replicate the problem. So
Yeah.
you can do the string thing where you pass that through the bit through the mouth and you kind of form like a little noose around their nose, holding the bit to the palate essentially, and then you tie that up to the brow band. And also, that's not
I
my
have
favorite way to do it.
that, but that's not that effective, or
It's like my last resort. It's like I've tried a whole bunch of other things and nothing has worked, and now that's kind of the last thing. It's like the equivalent of flooding,
mm,
basically. It isn't I got the horse to accept this. It's I put the horse in a position where it had no choice but to accept this.
I
That's how
see.
I would look at it. I would rather that the horse accepted this and understood that here's how you handle this thing. And if you handle this thing well, it's perfectly comfortable and everything's good to go. And I'm going to be consistent. You have nothing to fear, nothing to withdraw from. There's going to be no pain involved in this. That's the situation I want to set up. Um, with most of them, that'll have like a little bit of playing with the bit too much. So this is why I don't have this problem. I put a snaffle in their mouth, O-ring, sweet iron, copper inlay, reasons for all of that. And I have it just on a little string. It just goes on their head. No reins attached, no headstall. It's just on, and I do groundwork with the horse. So as soon as the horse is gentle enough for me to get that bit on them, I put it on them, and then I forget that it's on them, and we just
Yeah.
work on all kinds of other things. And so their brain is engaged, their feet are moving, they need to breathe, they're not worrying about this thing. They need to breathe, and the best way for them to breathe is to form the mouth seal so that they can breathe the best way they can. And literally within 5 or 10 minutes, almost every horse I've ever done that on is packing the bit like they're an 8-year-old, and they're doing all the things, and it's not ever a problem. So I don't like put a bit in a horse's mouth and then drive them. The first step
Immediately.
is establish the mouth seal. If you don't have the mouth seal, you're working on that. You should not be progressing beyond step one until you have step one accomplished. So uh,
Yeah.
that's how I go about it. Like the bit in their mouth and then do some groundwork. You don't have to have a whole lot of skill to have a lot of good things happen there. Kind of get it for free. So
Do you do any line driving or bit education on the ground before you ride them, whether it's a colt or an adult horse that you're restarting or problem horse, whatever it may be?
I do. I honestly don't do a lot of line driving myself. Um, I've
I feel like it's phasing out.
that yeah. So I had some bad experiences with it when I was younger. Um, I didn't start out doing that. I started out, I would ride a horse in a halter or side pull or something the first few
Mhm.
rides, and they would get comfortable with me. I could move my hands without them jumping, and we could turn left and we would turn right, trots, figure eights, and then I'd put a snaffle on them, and then they already were comfortable with all that stuff. So now we just had to say the touch comes here instead of on your nose, and now you turn left, and so that
Yeah.
wasn't a big deal. There was a particular trainer that used to send me a bunch of colts to start, but he would do a bunch with them first. He just wouldn't get on them. And one of the things he would do is line drive them, and they had mouths like a bear trap. I mean, like no feel at all. And so I'm 19 and that's what I'm getting. And I'm like, yeah, there's nothing involved in line driving that I want to be a part of. Like this is not a good or beneficial thing. And so I stayed away from it for a long time. Um, I honestly don't do it very much myself just because I'm very, very used to not doing it. Now, do I do anything with the bit on the ground? Yeah, I'm gonna have it in their mouth. I'm gonna stand beside them and pick up on the left rein, and I'm looking for the response. And the same to the right. I will sometimes tie them around. If I'm starting a colt, I always tie them around for the first couple of days. The reason for that is I have had a few colts that when they got that kind of in a bind from for the first time or two, they flipped right over. And I've had a horse flip over on me and almost kill me a long time ago. I don't have any desire to have that happen a second time. And so if I see something where I can avoid being flipped over on, I'm like, yeah, we're going to do that thing. So,
I see.
so if they have a little panic point, they can work that out by themselves without me being in danger. And, so I'll do that with all of them, all the colts I'm starting anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I would guess you
Uh,
would have roped feet and maybe hobbled before that too.
Probably, yeah. Most any colt I'm starting, I will do leading by the feet. That I consider that a pretty basic life skill. If you bring me in a 4-year-old to put a better handle on, and then maybe not. It kind of depends on whether it's on your agenda or not. But if you're expecting me to set the foundation for this horse and give it the best shot that I can give it, then yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if I've remembered the whole question here or if I've gone off on a tangent or what. But,
It's all really good information. I think we're sharing a lot of great information. We were talking about tongues getting over bits, stuff like that, and it kind of segued into some other stuff. But I
yeah.
can circle back because I do have a question.
So
Those Go ahead.
let me answer that so the tongue over bit thing is generally an oversensitivity. Okay, so that is a scenario where, just like the saddle, if I saddled a horse for the first time and he bucks, that doesn't mean I have a saddle problem and I can never saddle this horse and it's going to be a trigger. It means I need to help him work through it and learn to accept it and handle it. Right. So that's tongue over bit is the same sort of thing. If like you've been riding a horse 6 months and he has the tongue over the bit, that's you have a legitimate problem at this point. You should have stopped way back when and solved that before you pulled on him and turned him left a whole bunch of times on his bars. I saw a post. Social media is terrible. I remember the days when I never said the phrase "I saw a post."
Yeah, right.
But it was yet another pretty famous person, and I think this one was a body worker teaching people about the body, that it was again treating the tongue as though it's just a convenient pad in the mouth for us to place a bit on. And that is not at all even kind of true. The whole deal is about the tongue. If you get through the tongue and you're doing damage to bars, that is exponentially worse than you probably realize it is. Bar damage is not the thing you should be thinking about. It is that you blew through the tongue, which is the actual communication tool in the mouth. That's where all of the information. It's a serious. I've probably hit this drum a bunch of times, but it's all about the tongue. The tongue is majorly neurologically wired to a degree that almost nothing else in the entire body is. It is the only part of your body involved in 3 of the 5 senses: touch, taste, and smell. It's a major communication thing because of all the data that it can do. Every single mammal, because we have to suckle and drink milk, whether they're born blind and deaf for 3 weeks like puppies and kittens, or whether they can get up an hour like a deer or a horse, they have to be able to suckle and swallow immediately. They explore the world through their mouth. It is all about the tongue and the swallowing reflex. Those are so much more important in this equation than people realize. I can't emphasize that enough. It is, the tongue is not a convenient pad in the horse's mouth that you can just kind of dismiss and not worry so much about. It's the thing. Okay, sorry, my blood pressure is going up a little bit now.
Let me just ask another question about the tongue then. So these broodmares that we have at the school, they've been on the track. So they've had their tongues probably tied, they've had their tongues grabbed a lot, like in school I was taught to examine the mouth, you grab the tongue, you pull it way out to the side, you look around in the mouth and stuff. Learned a lot later on how much that's jacking up your hyoid and how bad, really, that is to do that regularly to the horse, if not even just one time. But these these mares, I'm looking at them, and you put the bit in, and they're chewing it a lot immediately, and their tongues are just like everywhere. Like they're not just chewing it and the tongue's staying, and the tongue's going out to the left and to the right, and just in so many different places. And so I was curious if you have experience with bidding a horse that has had their tongue particularly tied or pulled on rather than just offended, majorly offended, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah. That's a very good question. So first of all, yes, please do not grab your horse's tongue. I will say there's some vets, there's some equine dentists, there's some body workers that have a certain amount of anatomical knowledge and skill and feel. And so there are some people that could do that and it would be okay because they know when to let go and how hard to pull and so forth. The average person, absolutely beyond no shadow of a doubt, has no business grabbing a horse's tongue and trying to hold it. Don't do that. You can cause major, 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 major problems. Okay. So sorry.
No, we gotta say it. We gotta
Yeah.
educate.
Yeah. Like that's a high, can it be done? Yes, by a highly trained person, kind of like heart surgery. Okay. If you're a heart surgeon, you can do heart surgery. If you're Joe Smith down the road, please don't do that. Um, okay. So there's a few things with this. I'm gonna probably go to jaw flexion. So I'm gonna stand in front of the horse and insert my thumbs. I'm gonna feel the bars, and that's kind of how we palpate the mouth and feel the tongue. So probably the first thing I'm gonna do when I do that should activate the horse to stick their tongue out and do all of these things. I'm gonna look for symmetry or asymmetry. So does the tongue do wild things? Maybe so. Does the tongue go left as much as it goes right? That's what I need. If they do their tongue out all the time and it goes right every single time, or it never comes to center or something, then that would be an indication that I may have a physiological problem here. The hyoid is completely jacked, or there is some nerve damage and they have paralysis and cannot bring the tongue left anymore, or something along those lines. So if I see what you're talking about and I go to palpate the mouth and feel the bars and things, and they come out with a very asymmetric tongue, then you are probably looking at a problem you can't completely fix. You may be able to make it better to a degree, but asymmetries of, like a stroke victim, right? If you lose control of the left side of your body, maybe we can get you kind of walking with a cane again, right? But you're not going to be in the Olympics at this point in time. We have to temper our expectations. So the better thing is don't do the stuff that causes those kinds of problems, you know, like tongue ties and all. That this was a little bit of a horrifying moment for me. It's when I was doing the original bit of going through research and stuff for the bit video. So most of the breathing problems that we would consider being caused by bits, air quotes caused by bits, has to deal with dorsal displacement of the soft palate. So basically, we have withdrawal of the tongue, the flat part of the tongue that we see in the front. The rest of the tongue looks nothing like that. It gets way, way bigger to the back. It's like a pyramid kind of, and the base of the pyramid is in the back. So if the horse does withdrawal of the tongue or any of the defensive tongue issues, one of the first things that happens is it humps up in the back. And the back of the throat is where the soft palate and the epiglottis form the rear half of the mouth seal. And when that is broken by the tongue pushing up on it, that's when we negatively affect the breathing of the horse. Horses are obligate nose breathers. So unlike us, they cannot breathe in through their mouth. They can only breathe in through their nose. And so in the back of their throat, that seal being formed is a big deal. So to give you just an example, like that seal is what causes snoring in humans. If you have ever, like fourth grade at the cafeteria and a friend makes you laugh and you have chocolate milk come out of your nose, that was a failure of that seal. So we have it too, but in a horse, because they can only breathe a certain way, it's even more important. So that's why offense of the tongue it's a huge deal. But it's kind of like, Doc, it hurts when I move my arm like this. Well, don't do that. If you don't offend the tongue, then none of these problems happen. Like that's the secret. That's the deal. Uh, so if I have wild tongue stuff, I'm putting the bit in the mouth loosely, especially loosely. I'm going to maybe make you uncomfortable with how loose it is. I might do it an inch below the corner of the mouth on that horse. I
Okay.
want it annoying. I want, I need some stimulus for them to try to solve. It's like a puzzle. Here is an annoying thing. Figure out how to handle it in a way that it does not annoy you. Their first answer is tongue on top of the bit. It doesn't annoy me here because my bars are essentially numb neurologically, and thus if I put it under my tongue on the bars, I have put this thing on mute. So that's what most horses that learn to put their tongue over the bit, they're being pulled on way too heavily for the sensitive and communicative tongue to handle, and so they take the tongue out of the equation and they put you on the numb part of their mouth, which is the bars. So what I'm going to essentially do is say, that's the wrong answer. Let me pick this bit up and put it back on top of the tongue. And they withdraw the tongue again. And then I pick the bit up and I put it. So I'm literally standing beside them, holding the rings of the cheeks. And when they put their tongue over the bit, I pick it up toward the palate. And then I get it back on top of their tongue. And then I let go. And then we wash, rinse, repeat
Okay.
that 859 times until it sits on their tongue and they're still for 3 seconds. And then I back up and I pet them. And then we just work on developing the habit. The same exact way. If I picked up lightly on the rein to the left and he moved his head to the right, I would not release that. I would wait until his nose came a little bit to the left. And then I would release that. And I would, through that, encourage the habit that I want the horse to have. Right? It's absolutely no different. You should treat establishment of the mouth seal as though it is the first step in all communication through the bit. If you don't have it, stop and work on it. It's an absolute. It's the basis of everything. If you don't have it, you have bigger problems than you think you have. Um, so some of these horses, like the tongue tying and all, that's what I was saying when I was doing the research. The dorsal displacement of the soft palate. I was reading a few papers about that, and it literally led to a veterinary prescription for the solution to dorsal displacement of the soft palate was tongue tying. And I was like, no, no, like, will it solve dorsal displacement of the soft palate? It will, like, because we physically removed the tongue from being able to cause that to happen. But does it cause 9 other problems? Yes, it does. Now we have, like, you can see horses with arthritis in the hyoid and things like that. It's because, you know, things like that. So that's kind of stuff I'm looking for. I also will teach palpating under the jaw. You can feel 3 points of the hyoid. So you have what's called the lingual process, and that's basically where the tongue ties in. And then there's 2 bones that run inside the jawbone going back toward the throat. And so you could feel all 3 of those points pretty easily under your horse's jaw. And so I would feel like most of the time you're going to get, it depends on how big the horse is, but you can fit like a finger between the inside of the jawbone and the outside of the hyoid on both sides. But you
Okay.
will come across horses where you can fit 2 fingers on the left and 1 on the right. And so I know I have a hyoid that's off center, and like we have structural problems, and we need to do some of those jaw releases and get them to stick their tongue out as far as we can, forward and long, and kind of stretch all of that stuff. And hopefully we can kind of get that hyoid back in function and form and where it should be, and so forth. So if you're seeing tongue asymmetry, wild tongue, these are not good signs. That is a oh no kind of a situation, and particularly the nerve damage stuff, because you're not fixing that. It may come back to a degree in 3 years, but like we don't have you good to go on Monday. That's
Yeah.
a problem, real problem.
Yeah.
So
That answers a lot of questions. One more question related to that. something I noticed whenever we were bidding these mares, and we just did like a 1 day basically putting the bridles on, see how they bridle. That's all the time that I ended up having for the semester. I now realize I should have been bridling them so they could be packing it through all of our other groundwork earlier in the semester. But it was my first semester teaching it, first time doing this exact thing too. So we'll make it better next time. But something I noticed, we were just working on bridling, and then we worked on bridling with a curb, specifically making space with the curb strap so that the students could get handy with that. And I just had one of mine, and it's just a little low port with a roller curb bit. And something I noticed in two of them is their mouths were significantly quieter with that bit compared to we were doing a single jointed, like an egg butt or a Western D or something like that. And that really made me start thinking about if we were going to be training these horses to ride. I completely understand having them carry it, get the mouth seal, that sort of deal. But when I put that curb on, and I even put my finger in the mouth, had them lick a little bit, and then they still kind of picked it up and held it way faster than the snaffles. So I was curious if you have any thoughts around that. Maybe some thoughts why or reasons. Because another thing that's been on my mind a lot is no joint, two joints, one joint in our snaffle bits. How do you pick? When do you use? Different traditions say no joints ever. Some traditions say two joints. Well, it traps the tongue. Other times you got one joint. So that's like 4 questions in one, but you can start wherever you like.
No, very good question. So, this kind of ties in with the fatigue stuff that we talked about. So the tongue is a muscle, and just like any other muscle, it could be weak or it could be strong. You could be very coordinated with it. You could be not so coordinated with it, right? So there are horses, a lot of times it's horses that have some weaknesses. It can also be it could be experiential. So they could have an association with this bit was in my mouth or this type of mouthpiece
Yes.
and it was handled this way. And thus
Yes.
I'm either good with it or I'm not, right? So it could be
Mhm.
experiential, but if a horse has a fairly weak tongue and hasn't really got the mouth seal thing down, then the solid bit will make that a little bit easier for them because they don't have to stabilize it. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what I would say is, and this is very common in the bit world right now, the trend is toward those types of bits, especially like Myler has made their entire reputation basically on that kind of thing.
The
I
mullen mouth, basically.
Yeah, I really view that as like a training wheels kind of bit.
Okay.
So you're not going to fall over with it, but it's also not going to develop the skill set that we're really trying to develop right now. So a horse truly forming a mouth seal, holding the bit, picking it up, sucking on it where it has full contact, and thus will feel all of the signals I might give to them. That will not be done as well in the more solid mouthpiece. Okay. Now, some horses are like indestructible tanks, and it doesn't much matter what you do. They're going to be okay and they're going to tolerate it. Some are like super sensitive ninnies. So, am I going to say there's never a time and a place for the bit that makes this thing easier? No, like there is, right? But ultimately, this is a skill, and when I want the horse to actually understand, and I want to build. I want them to get better and better and better at it. So kind of the hardest of those for the horse to handle is the double jointed snaffle, generally. And I would say without question, the majority of the horses that I work with mouth problems are ridden in double jointed snaffles. Um, which is not to say that they cannot be used successfully, but they are probably most commonly used poorly. There just are some rules you have to stand by. You have to give the horse breaks. They have to kind of lick and chew and reset and all the tension release and the things that. So if you think you're going to go get on a horse with a double jointed snaffle and ride circles and contact for 45 minutes straight, that is a recipe for problems. You cannot do that. Like it's a small minority of horses that would handle that without problems. And so again, it's our usage. It's not that the double jointed snaffle can't be used well. It's that it tends to be used with too much contact for too long. And the too much contact for too long has consequences. And those consequences are usually not good. But if you don't do that, then right, things can be just fine. So, just from a consumer perspective, people are always looking for like, what's the miracle thing that solves my problems without me having to work or learn or whatever. And so that's where these solid mouth bits are kind of coming in and becoming successful. But that's not it's not my approach. I
Yeah.
don't want I view it as this. Here's a company going, you're too stupid to learn or to do better. So here's something you can't screw up. That's what I think of every time I see those things being advertised. And I'm like, I'm not stupid. I can learn and get better. I want the thing that's going to challenge me and I have to be skilled with. And the communication is better through it. Like you can, signal things in ways you can't with the solid mouthpiece. So, okay, I don't know if I answered all of your questions or if I got on another Daniel tangent right there, but
Hey, Daniel tangents are educational. So I think that answers a lot there. I'm gonna ask one more question. It's a really heavy question, but I think let's bring it down to like one piece. So the question is how to help a horse move with balance and self-carriage. We all know this is the thing we work on for years. And so I think maybe the question we could reframe it and say, if you were going to make one change tomorrow, that, man, this is really generalized, but if you're going to go ride your horse tomorrow and you want to try to encourage that horse to ride more balanced and with more self-carriage, what's the thing that you would do? What's the thing you would focus on? What would you change as the rider, or what would you pay attention to as the rider to try and be heading there? Is that too big of a question still? Because
it's
there's a lot there, I think.
I don't know how to answer it as one question. So
Okay.
let me split it a little bit like this. I would say that balanced is a stage, and it's a stage a lot of horses don't ever get to. Okay. I would say that self carriage is a stage beyond balance. Okay. So self carriage is balance without a whole lot of help from me. Balance could be accomplished with a whole lot of help from me. I would, that's kind of how I would look at it. So self carriage is we're climbing up the pyramid. We're getting to a subset of kind of thing. Here's what I would say that's kind of the simplest boiled down thing for all of that. People need to think more about getting out of the horse's way. I think that too many people they're kind of in the horse's way. And like this is one of it's a big question, but
I know.
if you really watch most what you would call a high level trainer riding on a nice horse, it should be pretty boring because it doesn't look like they're really doing much. And if I'm going to be honest, they're not. Right. And that's kind of the secret. They're like setting this stage up, and then the horse follows through to the stage, and then they get the hell out of the horse's way. And if you see someone in it when they're riding, it looks like work. I guarantee you they're in the horse's way. It should look like you're not doing much. And greener horse, you may be having they haven't really found their place in between your reins and your legs and all that stuff, right? And so you're having to make these little adjustments and all. That's fine. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's not a horse that's anywhere near self carriage, either. We're on the opposite side of the spectrum there. So if you're riding a pretty nice horse that is in balance and is coming close to self-carriage, that's not work. That's very easy to do. If you're doing a whole lot of work, then you're probably messing up. You need to get out of their way. And usually the people that are doing that, they're afraid of the horse failing. They feel like if I let go, or if I stop driving with my legs, or if I stop doing whatever this thing is, the horse is going to quit. They're going to fall out of balance. They're going to, well, yeah, obviously. And then you put them back in balance again, and then you get out of their way, and then they start to eventually, they hold it for a few seconds, a couple of strides, and then they fall out of balance, and then you put them back in balance again, and then you let go again. And it's the process of them failing that is how they learn. If you refuse to let them fail, then you're keeping them from learning what the thing actually is. You are holding them back. You must get out of their way. So, big philosophical thing, but anyway, that's
It's super applicable, very applicable, and I think that's a encompassing answer to that question. And that was kind of what I was after, is like what's the thing that could help? So,
yeah. Self carriage, I don't think we hardly ever see.
yeah, true.
I think that's super, super, super rare. And particularly a lot of times when it's talked about, this is not always like, I'm gonna probably release this one today, actually. So like Patrick King just did an article about this today, and he was saying basically that long reins and self carriage are not the same thing. I think most of what we see that is called self carriage is held carriage. It's exactly what I'm talking about. It is a person that if they let go of the reins, the horse would fall on its head. That it is not self carriage, because that person is working their butt off to keep this horse in this frame, and they haven't gotten to the point where they let go and see what happens, and then they show the horse repetitiously, nope, this is where I want you, now hold it because I'm getting out of your way, nope, this is where I want you, now hold it because I'm getting, like, they never get out of the horse's way. And that's what self carriage is to me. If you're, big contact, you cannot exhibit self carriage. You cannot, by definition, you cannot, because it's not self. It's held. So
Certainly. Well, I think that encompasses all of the questions that we had in the group on that post. So, is there anything else in particular you were wanting to add to this discussion, or another question that you would like to answer?
I tell you what, I would like to say this. We touched on it just a little bit, and I've had a couple of different customers lately that have had this experience, and this is the thing I want you to remember. Don't take it personally. The horse is not doing things to you. It's not trying to hurt your feelings. It is just protecting itself in its own little world. It's not capable of being aware of what your emotions are, or manipulating them, or anything along those lines. And failure is capitalized, is a normal, predictable part of the process. You cannot train an animal without them doing it wrong and you showing them how to do it right, and them doing it wrong and then you show them how to do it right. That is how they learn how to do it right. So don't be afraid to fail, and don't take it personally when it happens, because it's supposed to. It's important that it does. It should be a goal of yours that failures occur so that you can fix them. And that is how the horse learns to do it correctly. It's hugely important. It's not a problem. It doesn't mean you're insufficient. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It doesn't mean this isn't going to work out eventually. It doesn't mean any of those things. It's perfectly normal. It's like a couple that thinks they're going to meet, date, get married, stay married for 50 years and not ever have a fight. That is a naive, stupid notion. You have to have the fights to learn about each other, to adjust your behavior, to accommodate your spouse. That is how the relationship itself actually develops and grows. It's a necessary, normal part of it. So don't be surprised when those things happen. Don't take it personally that you failed or that it hates you or it. None of that stuff is true. That's all absolutely predictable, and it's absolutely going to happen, and it absolutely should. Okay.
That's called a life golden nugget.
Hopefully. Yep.
Well, I think that's probably a good place to quit then for this podcast.
Well, you have any other thoughts or anything?
Nothing in particular. I think this will be a good listen for anybody.
Well, I certainly appreciate you joining me for this and kind of throwing the questions my way and everything. We'll have a link to Nicole's Horsemanship page and all of her stuff in the show notes as well. Y'all should definitely give her a follow and check her out. And she is one of those young ladies out there that is doing her part to make the whole world of this stuff and the young people that are coming into it more educated and better stewards and all. And so she's definitely the kind of person that we should be supporting and promoting and learning from and helping and all of those good things. So thank you, Nicole, very much for all the stuff I know you do that is behind the scenes that you don't necessarily get public credit for and all of that. We need people like you out there. So thank you for being one of them.
I appreciate that a lot.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.